All right, we're rolling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to NBOA Clinic number 6, and also welcoming Renee Rector, who has kindly agreed to join us and provide us with her expertise for this clinic. Renee, we missed you. Glad to have you back from last year and the year before, and looking forward to a lot of fun this evening. A couple of things before we get started. I want to clear up one thing we talked about last week. I think we maybe used a little bit of some imprecise language when we talked about the play where a timeout was granted while teams were scrambling for what we call a loose ball. Timeout was granted to the team in black, as a matter of fact. And the question that we raised during the clinic was, what if nobody for the team in black had possession of the ball at the time the timeout was requested and granted? What if it was still loose, in other words, the ball? And I think during the course of that discussion, we may have referred, and of course, the official did blow his whistle and did grant the timeout to black. And we're assuming that no player for black ever gained possession of the ball for purposes of this discussion. So we referred to that whistle as an inadvertent whistle, I believe. And in fact, by rule, it's not an inadvertent whistle. It's Quinn, Renee, if you could think of a better word for me, do it. The best way I can put that is it's not an inadvertent whistle, it's an incorrect whistle, but it's not inadvertent. And the reason it's not inadvertent is because a coach did in fact request a timeout. And the timeout was in fact granted. So that takes it out of the realm of inadvertent for purposes of the rule, which means that you are going to grant the timeout, even though he shouldn't have been given the timeout because no player on his team ever gained possession of the ball, we're saying. He's still going to be granted the time. That coach is still going to be granted the timeout that he requested. And we are going to put the ball back in play at the point of interruption, as Quinn pointed out at the last clinic, because there was a point of interruption. The team in white had team possession at the time the timeout was incorrectly granted, so they're going to get the ball back for a throw-in once the timeout is over. It's the same thing would apply if the dreaded situation, this is an even worse situation than the one we saw in the clip. Let's say team A is dribbling the ball up the court and the coach for team B requests a timeout and asks for a timeout and you grant it. That's not an inadvertent whistle by rule. So you have to grant that timeout. He gets the timeout. Hopefully they weren't out of timeouts at that point. And you give the ball back to the team that had the ball when the timeout's over with. What is an inadvertent whistle and the kind of situation that we're talking about is where you think a coach, well, it's the Kirby Smart situation, right, Quinn? Where you think he's asking for a timeout, but he's actually clapping. So I'm being a little bit facetious here. Coach calls out a play that sounds like timeout, and you blow your whistle and grant the timeout, and then realize the coach wasn't asking for a timeout at all. The coach was saying side out or diamond or 5 out or whatever the coach has got that sounds like timeout, but it's not timeout. That is an inadvertent whistle, and you do not grant the timeout. You take the timeout back in that situation. Anything to add to that, Quinn or Renee? All right. So I got a call from an official who asked me about a block charge scenario. And the question that he asked was, what if one official is calling a player control foul and gives the preliminary signal for it, while another official in the crew is calling and giving the preliminary signal for a blocking foul. But the reason that he or she is calling the blocking foul is because the defender has got one or both feet touching out of bounds at the time of contact. And the question is that a blarge? And the answer is no, it's not. It's not a blarge because in that scenario, the defender by rule is illegal, cannot take a charge in that situation by rule. So it has to be a blocking foul by rule. And just to be clear, that's not one official imposing his or her judgment over another official. It's one official seeing what the other official couldn't see and realizing that the defender is not legal. Anything to add to that, Quinn or Renee?
I was just going to add, let's say your partner, let's say it's not I mean, the Blarge scenario is a good one to talk about, but let's say your partner, you don't have two different preliminary signals. Your partner, play comes down the baseline and the slot, calls it a charge and you're in the lead and you clearly see the defender has 1 foot out of bounds. Now you haven't signaled anything, so we don't have this Blarge scenario, but you're going to go to your partner and give them that information. Hey, 14's right foot was out of bounds. You're going to want to change that to a block. And your partner's going to go, thank you. And then just let them turn around, change the call. You're going to have to explain to the coach. But again, that's a situation where, again, it's not really a blarge because we're just sharing information. We're communicating that by rule, there's something that happened that the other official didn't see.
Very good. All right, let's talk a little bit about traveling. And I want to preface this presentation with an observation that probably 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, the NCAA and the North Carolina High School and the National Federation, I should say, got into a real twit over traveling. And there was a point of emphasis, as a matter of fact, with the National Federation that we just were not calling enough travel. We were missing too many traveling violations, just missing. And the NCAA took the position, at least on the men's side. I don't think so much on the women's side, Renee, but certainly on the men's side, the NCAA said, oh, we've done studies and 95% of all spin moves are travel. So if it's a spin move, just call it travel. And they did that for about a minute at the college level on the men's side. And then I guess the coaches went nuts because they weren't travels all the time. I mean, some of them were, but not all of them. And so everybody's backed up. And I believed from the get-go that while we may miss some travels that are travels, we also, I felt like 10 years ago, we call too many travels that aren't travels. So I think the clips that you're going to see here and the commentary that you're going to hear, particularly from Quinn and Renee, is going to sort of illustrate what I just said, hopefully. So if you want to go to the first one, Quinn, and give your commentary.
All right, so we'll watch this through once. All right. So backing this up to here, we're gonna have the shot, we're gonna have the rebound come off. Just basic travel sort of officiating. We've got to identify the pivot foot. If we don't identify the pivot foot, we don't have a chance to correctly referee this. And in this case, right, we've got a player who's right in the middle of the lane. Now, primarily here, right, we're on lead side. This is primarily going to be lead's responsibility, but especially on travels in the post, trail can help us out. Especially, I don't love the lead's position here. Like to see him definitely a little further off the baseline, maybe a half step wider. But again, if we're going to referee this whole play, including the travel from the lead, we need a little wider view. In this case, it's a little hard to see, but it does look like so coming back here. So we come down. If we assume like right here, we've got the left foot here is the pivot foot. It does look like that foot is picked up and put back down um, as he's trying to sort of work his way between these two players. So it does look like we have a correct call here. But again, identify the pivot foot, keep a big picture look on the play, and be prepared as the outside official if we have a play in the post to help out with traveling there, especially it can lead can get sort of consumed with several bodies in here.
Yeah, the lead's got a lot to referee on that play. And I don't know that the trail was in, I mean, I don't know that the trail could have even put himself in a much better position to try to help out. Um, and I will tell you that if that's a travel, kudos to the lead to be able to referee all of that. Um, but I'll also tell you that if that's the one clip that they sent in to me, as the supervisor and said, hey, I believe your officials, if we didn't call it, if we did not call a travel on that play, and that's the one clip they sent me, I would probably throw that one in the trash can and call the crew up and say, that's the only play that anybody had a complaint about. Great job, crew. Great job. All right, Renee.
All right, so I'll let you guys watch the clip. It's a better view on the replay, but it's a rebounding. Um, White gathers possession of the rebound, but as he's coming down, he loses possession of the ball before making contact with the floor. I just think it's an instance of where we anticipated a travel instead of seeing the whole entire play through. But this is not a travel. White loses control before making contact with the floor.
I think it's interesting too on this play, if I'm not mistaken, the official that's getting chewed is not the calling official, but he's getting chewed. The best, you don't have a dog in that fight, assuming that he didn't have a whistle on this play, which I don't think he did. I think the only whistle was from the lead. Assuming that the trail did not have a whistle on that play, he just needs to, he doesn't have a dog in the fight. Just move on and let your partners put that ball in play as quickly as possible. And let's move on to let's move on with the game. There's no reason for for me, if I'm the trail official on this play, if I'm him, I'm doing exactly what he's doing. I'm playing dumb. I don't have a clue. I'm moving on. I don't have an answer for you. I didn't make the call. And I'm not gonna say anything and throw my partner under the bus. I'm just not gonna comment on the call because it wasn't my call. I didn't make it. And I'm not gonna try to explain my partner's call.
We also this is a situation where we talked a lot last week about well, don't just run to a spot. Uh, I'm going to trot my happy behind to my baseline spot on the other end. I mean, this official sort of slowing down to have a conversation. We don't need to have a conversation about this. I mean, my partner will be done here in a minute. You know, if we get to the baseline, because now, you know, we're in the coach's space now. It's going to be really bad optically if we have to give the coach a technical foul while we're walking into the middle of his coach's box. If we get to the baseline and we're in our position for the next play, and now the coach is out barking at us and we have to give a technical foul, it looks a little better optically. So again, this might be a situation where just running to a spot might actually be a good idea because we're dead ball.
Good point. Quinn, this is an interesting one that you got because we don't see it all that often at this level.
Yeah. So the ball's going to be passing to the corner here, and this player's going to think about a shot for about half a second, and then he drops the ball, picks it up, and passes it. So again, like Chuck said, this is a situation we don't see that often. If a player leaves the floor while holding the ball and then drops the ball to the floor to avoid having his or her shot or pass blocked, that is legal. So that dropping it is legal. Okay, so you can go up for a shot and decide I'm right here, so we back up a little bit. So go up for the shot, realize it's going to get blocked. Everything so far is legal. No problem here. What you can't do is come back and be the first to touch it. And once he was the first to touch it, this should have been called a traveling violation. Um, so again, it's one of those, like Chuck said, we don't see often, but you sort of want to have in the back of your mind. If this, we don't see it a lot in the post, often because I mean I've seen it happen there, but often there's so many bodies in the post that ends up hitting off somebody else if you just drop the ball. But this one on the perimeter, he sees this guy coming, the guy jumps past him, and now he's wide open to pick the ball back up the second time.
Chuck, would you
Very
be
good.
okay if, let's say the seed just doesn't pick up on the rule and the trail has nothing else to look at in this situation? Would you be okay with them calling that travel?
That's a great question, Renee. So somebody asked me, another official called in with a question. He saw a kick ball from like 60 feet away and it was clearly a kick ball and nobody else called it. And I don't know, 60 feet probably was an exaggeration, but at some distance out of his primary coverage area. So here's the deal. I don't think, and I think Quinn is hesitant. I could tell by his body language just now. He's a little hesitant on this. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the bull by the horns here. I don't want us coming out of our primary coverage area to call some nickel dime to nitpick. And this one, there's a possibility that we talked about it in rehearsal. Is it possible that this guy blocked this shot? Well, he didn't. I don't believe he did. But I don't know that the C,
Or that the ball hits off his hip right here, which again,
right. I
I
don't
don't
know
think
that
it
the
does.
trail, Renee, would have had a good enough look at that play to be able to judge whether or not the ball was touched by a defender, another player before it hit the floor, before it got to the floor. But if you're 100% certain, that is such an obvious violation. That's not a nitpicker. If you're 100% certain, you cannot tell me in the dressing room, hey, I had a great look at that. I believe we blew that, but I didn't feel like I could come from that far away. I think that's BS. I think that's I think that's BS. If he's in the now, if he's in the back court, now that's one thing, but he's in the front court. If he's got a good enough look at that play to be 110% sure on a major violation, then I'm okay personally with and actually would encourage somebody in my crew, an official in my crew to come get that. Are you okay with that, Renee?
Yeah, that was my whole thing. If it was 100% obvious, and again, he has nothing to referee at this point. So 9 times out of 10, he's looking at what's occurring. Could they make that call?
Very good. Okay. Who's up? Oh,
Uh,
I am. This is mine. How about that? I want to give you, go ahead and run the play through, and then I'm going to give you a quick reminder on a couple of rules here. So there was no call on this play. So here are the rules that we need to keep in mind. A player who catches the ball with both feet on the floor may pivot using either foot. When one foot is lifted, the other is the pivot foot. The pivot foot may not be lifted before the ball is released to start a dribble. Okay, this play is not a dribble, but that's the rule about, lifting your pivot foot before you start a dribble. The other thing just to keep in mind is after coming to a stop and establishing a pivot foot, a pivot foot may be lifted, but it cannot be returned to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try for goal. And that's what we have here. We have a stop. We have a pivot foot get lifted on a spin move, but it's actually, I don't even know if the pivot foot was lifted. No.
No.
So that's an absolutely legal play. Great no call on this play. And just again, as Renee said from the get-go, you got to establish the pivot foot. If you don't establish the pivot foot, you have no chance of getting these calls right on a consistent basis. Next. I thought I did pretty good on that one, Quinn.
a solid B plus.
Okay, all right, I'll take it. That's the highest grade I've ever gotten, Renee.
No, Chuck, it's got to be.
All right, let's see. This one's Renee's.
So we got a same situation as kind of the first clip. We got some post play. Like Chuck says, it boils down to finding exactly what the pivot foot is. This player actually switches feet, sorry, twice. The right foot was his initial pivot foot. He then switches to his left as the pivot foot and then switches back to his right as he passes the ball out. So this was actually a double travel where it just boils down to the C, making sure we understand pivot foot. And it also boils down to kind of what Quinn said earlier in rehearsal of we got to referee the offense just as much as we referee the defense. So many times, especially with this being a double team, we get caught up in trying to see what is the defensive player going to do, when really we just let the offense walk 2 times and still, well, we got it. Yeah, we got it the second time. So I just reference picking up pivot foot and making sure we are also refereeing the offense.
Take another, also, Renee, if you would, take us, just give, you and I talked a little bit about the lead's position on this play. Not that the lead had the dog in this fight on the travel, but just his position in general.
So one, he's too close on the baseline. I would like a more angled view. Maybe a step down because the ball is on the other side of the court. But we also have to realize in the league that the C can referee one matchup. Like we don't have to give extraordinary help when there's one matchup on the C side. So we have to let the C referee that, but we're help on anything that happens help side. But on this particular play, he's just too close to the inline where he cuts himself off to be able to have a real good angle on feet or foul, whatever was to occur.
Very good. Quinn, this is another one of my favorite plays.
Here we go. All right. So we're going to have a quick turnover. And after this quick turnover, okay, we have our new lead official call a double dribble. We often say it about travels, but also about double dribbles. Just because something looks funny or looks unusual does not make it illegal, right? And so on this play, so we got blue loses possession, or actually now blue has lost possession because white has gained possession. And now you're going to have to make a determination. You can make a determination one of two ways about what happens here with white. You could say white has possession and starts a dribble. Okay. If white has possession and starts a dribble, then the dribble starts, the dribble continues. There's nothing illegal about that. There's nothing that says you can't take 2 or 3 or 7 or 8 steps between your first and second dribble. There's also nothing illegal if we back up here, because the way the trail sort of signals that we were talking at, I think it's also possible that he thinks that the dribble was started with 2 hands, which is also legal. You can start a dribble with 2 hands. So in any case, if this is a dribble, there's no problem here. The other option you could say is, well, I don't really think he has, I don't really think he has control of the ball enough for this to be a dribble. I think he just batted the ball. In which case, if he just batted the ball, there's nothing to stop him from going and starting a dribble. Okay. So if you rule that he bats the ball here, then here he simply starts a dribble. It's a weird looking play. It's not illegal. Okay. So we've got to, again, I think we'll see this, and I think we might talk about it with some other plays. Don't be in a hurry to call a travel or to call a double dribble, and give yourself a second to process the play, and then we can come and get it if we need to. I think we just reacted here to a play that looked a little strange, or caught us
Either
off,
that or we don't know the rule.
or we don't know the rule.
Right.
But again, I would argue if you look at something and you go, oh, I think that might be illegal, don't blow your whistle. Unless you You're just 100% wrong about the rule, right? Don't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got the next one too.
Yeah.
A double feature, as it were.
You got an A+, by the way, Quinn.
Thank you. Uh,
We don't give any freebies.
we're not going to say a whole lot about this play. Let's just watch it through. This is a walk, okay, and it's a walk, and we don't call a walk, which is bad enough. Even worse, what we call is a foul on the defense. I think what we want to emphasize here with this, I mean, so just to make sure we're all on the same page, okay, the player is going to go airborne off of her left foot, put her left foot down again, and then put down her right foot. So the pivot foot is picked up, put down again, and then we put down another foot and go off that foot. So clearly a travel. We need to recognize that travel calls in some situations have very minimal impact and in some situations have a huge impact. So if we think about the impact here of this missed travel call, instead of giving the ball back to black, we're now putting white on the line to shoot 2 free throws. And even worse, if the ball had gone in, we could be scoring a basket and giving them a free throw. So we're going to talk about some plays where we say, maybe if we had not blown our whistle, whether it is a travel or isn't, maybe it wouldn't have been a huge deal. This is one that if we miss a travel here, this is a huge deal. Now you say, oh, it's 251 in the first. If you'll remember, this game comes down to the final buzzer. So this is, every call as we go back here is an impactful call, especially if we're taking away a possession when we shouldn't, or in this case, we're letting a team retain possession when they should have been called for a violation.
To be more precise, this game came down to the final premature buzzer, if
Yeah.
you'll recall correctly, because this was the game where the officials decided they wanted to go home a little bit early.
All right. The double world's worst double feature is over. Back to Renee.
So we got a rebound and play. I'm assuming the official had the white sliding their pivot foot. What two things we want to note on this particular play is let's get obvious. I don't think this was obvious enough. Not saying if obviously if the official had evidence that she traveled, please do call the travel. But this was just one that I don't think was obvious, especially with them being 93 feet away from the basket. The second thing is the official coming off the baseline too quick. I think a lot of times when we transition from lead to trail, we leave the baseline way too quick. And you can see here, she kind of gets blindsided, or not blindsided, but blocked in view of actually knowing what 10 did. She's so close. So we don't know if she got fouled. We don't know if she really did travel or just it looked like she did. So just a reminder from this, just take a second, pause when you're transitioning, make sure they gather the ball, they have possession, and then if we have a competitive matchup, then you want to, rush up to get in between the players so you can see. But we have to pause when transitioning. But I would say if it's a travel, it's a travel. It's just make sure we have our obvious travels.
That's great, Renee. And I would, just as a general comment, I watched, and I think Quinn, you probably did too. I watched this, actually Wyatt Howard picked out these clips from this game. And he had a great time doing it. I watched this entire game film, and traveling was the biggest call of the night in this game. There were, I can't tell you, I didn't catalog them, but I mean, there were just a bunch but there were more travel calls in this game than in any game that I observed combined all last year. And this is a state championship game. You would think that these people know kind of how to play the game, and yet they were called, the travels were called all over the court all the time. And then we missed, and those kind of like nickel dime, if that was a travel, I'm gonna give Renee the benefit of the doubt, because she says maybe the girl's foot slid a little bit. If that was a travel, I don't know how the official saw it from where he was, but that's a nickel dime. And yet you're gonna see a travel here in a minute. Well, you just saw one from Quinn in his A+ presentation. You saw one that was clearly a travel that we don't call, and you're gonna see another one in just a minute that was clearly a travel that was not called. And in fact, you're gonna see two more. But we're picking this up. That's just, and everybody's raising their hand. The travels that I like to call are the ones where, as I'm blowing my whistle, calling a travel, about, half the people in the stands and 3 or 4 players are screaming travel at the same time. Those are the travels I like to get. But
We just
anyhow,
have to
that's,
we just have to recognize this play is a minute and a half after the previous play you just saw. And coaches tend not to coaches, and especially coaches in a state championship game, they're usually pretty good coaches. They're going to adjust to what's being called. But when we are calling this and not calling obvious ones on the drive to the basket, that's when they get out of sorts because they don't know what to tell their players, right? I can't tell my players, hey, be aggressive and you can play a little fast and loose because they're not calling them. Now all of a sudden you get one on maybe a slight slide of the pivot foot. Those are the things that get coaches engaged in officiating, and to the extent we can prevent that, we want to do that.
all right. Next.
So, transition play, we have a travel here. Established pivot foot is her right foot, and she must release the ball before her right foot touches again, which she does not. So she establishes, and then she lands back down with her pivot foot. As we discussed earlier, a lot of times when this happens, when it's this obvious, is where as the lead official, you're expecting the defense to do something. So you pick up the defense and we take our eyes off the offense for a moment. And in that moment, anything can happen. So I do agree that the lead official picks up the ball, but then she sees the defender slashing over. So she's getting ready for a block charge play, probably takes her eyes off of it and misses the travel. But this is a travel. The second thing in this, we talked about the crash at the top, which if was called an offensive a foul, we wouldn't even be discussing the travel. But it just goes back to the C. The C, when in transition, all right, is the glue to making us look good. All right. Two things the C could have done better in this particular situation. As the ball is being dribbled towards them, all right, instead of holding, all right, to let it pass, maybe slide with the player and the defender, make sure there's no contact, and that would have put us at least where the 28-foot mark was to be able to really officiate that crash. Being that they probably didn't see it and know what happened, they didn't have a whistle on it, which you should do. If you don't know, don't blow. But there's two things where we got to have an effective C in this, and then if the C was where they were supposed to be, and maybe that crash didn't happen, they also could give help on that play. If something is obvious, all right, please don't be hesitant to give help. It can save your crew, especially with coaches.
Yeah, that's great. And what I like to say a lot of times is you got to referee the defense, primarily the defense, but you got to see the offensive player. All right, next one.
I think this is me too. Oh, so on this play, they call a travel on it. I don't have a travel. I believe she catches it in rhythm, or hops during the catch and then catches it and shoots. A lot of time we suspect or we may blow before because we're used to seeing that hop step after they catch. But this is also one where I mean, I had to rewind it a couple of times and really see that she actually caught it, or she was jumping before she actually caught it. But what helped us with this particular situation is the trail. I believe the trail has to either stop or get into a better area to where they're able to see from start to finish. It also would help too, because what if white was to foul black, or what if black was to kick out their foot, and it would have been an offensive foul. So just being aware of shooters and how the offense runs helps a lot in this particular situation. And two, I know me personally, in warm-ups, I figure out who the shooters are. I figure out how they shoot. I figure out where they prefer to shoot at, what side of the floor do they shoot at. And it kind of helps when I get in the game in the aspect of I know they're either going to hop step or they usually do this particular thing before they shoot. So that's another way you can kind of get more involved, especially on the shooting and traveling.
Well, you weren't interested in defense as a player. Why would you be interested in the defenders as a player, as an official? Huh?
Exactly. I keep the same flow.
Well, no, I think Renee makes a great point, and especially at the high school level, most shooters especially at the high school level, they have one sort of move that they're going to, it's their primary move. They're going to, whether that's to step to the side, whether that's maybe just a jab step to try and, get the defender to move, whatever it is. So watch, that time you're usually shaking hands and kissing babies, before the game, you could actually put it to some good use. uh
Possessions are critically important. We saw a game in a clip, previous clip, where the game was decided. I mean, they'll tell you, officials that refereed men's ACC will tell you, back when what's his name was coaching the team, Virginia squeezed the shot clock on every possession, right? So the number of possessions in a UVA basketball game were going to be limited. So every possession in a UVA game back in the day was, and I'm talking about like 2, 3 years ago, was critically important because there were so few of them. But maybe that's not to that extreme here, but every possession is important. And if we're going to take a possession away from a team, let's make sure that it's because we have to. Not because we think we have to, or not because possibly we have to, or like Quinn said and Renee said, it looked like maybe it was something. That play, even if she actually caught the ball while she had a foot on the floor and then jumped up and came back down, did that little hop thing. Nobody's guarding her. Nobody's guarding her. And it would have been I would have had to have slowed this thing down 30 times to see whether or not that actually happened. You've got to slow it down that many times. It's not a travel. So let's be careful on those, please. All right.
All right, we're gonna have a travel here in the post and the video. Well, it didn't help any that I paused it right at the point of the travel. There's gonna be a play in the post here. So the first thing I want to just talk about is the coverage on this play. So Trail has the ball's being passed back over here. It's being passed here. Lead, really, we don't have any really competitive matchups in the post here. I mean, these two are just sort of cutting across the lane. This is, they're there, but it's not a very engaged matchup. But we do have screens, and the ball is coming back this way. So I think in this situation, lead, take a step out, get a little more width, and open up to help out here. And I think if we do that, the first thing that will happen is we'll actually pick up this player. So the player who passes the ball then comes around that screen and is wide open. So instead of, you'll notice at the point the ball is coming into the post, we're backing up because we didn't do our work early. So we're at the point this initial pass comes in, we're moving, which I mean it's not horrible. It happens. Um, so it backs up, and then again, I think probably here we take sort of maybe a jab step or just end up dragging that back foot. Um, again, it's at best a marginal call, may be correct. The mentality we want to have, right, is what's the effect of this, right? So if I blow my whistle, I take a possession away. So I've got to be 110% sure. If I'm not 100% sure on this, well, what actually happens on this play? She dribbles herself up. I mean, she's guarded up against the baseline underneath the basket, right? So sort of there's no big harm here if we're not 100% sure. So again, be 100% sure if we're going to take a possession away from a team here. Last thing I'll just mention coverage wise, again, we're in the we got a travel play. It's with the back foot, right? Trey will be prepared to help out on these. It's easy for the lead to miss obvious. This is not a big time obvious travel, but it's easy for the lead to miss a big time obvious travel when it's with that back foot, when they slide that back foot. And that's where trail, a player spins and they really drag that foot 2, 3 feet. The trail can come save us on those. So trail stay engaged on those plays as well.
Very good. I think this is the last clip we're going to show on the issue of traveling.
Yep.
And that's not the call that was made, by the way. Gwen, I think we have a replay on this, so go show it all the way through the replay,
Yeah.
please. What's called here, everyone, is a held ball. Forget all the action that took place after the call was made. We're not going to comment on that. So this is not a correct call. Anytime this is a traveling violation. I think everybody should know why this is a traveling violation, but she had the ball in her possession while she was semi-standing up right there. And she has the ball all the way down to the floor. She never loses possession of the ball. So that had to be and then she gets tied up. But that was a travel before the tie up. Anytime that a player is standing, has possession of the ball, and ends up on the floor, still in possession of the ball, having maintained possession of the ball the entire time, it is either a travel or that player got knocked down, in which case it's a foul, or not, assuming it was knocked down by a defender. In this case, she was knocked down by her own player, I think, but so it couldn't be a foul. I think that's right. But in any event, this should have been called something other than a held ball before the held ball occurred. We have to, well, just a reminder, on a play like that, if you're going to call that the travel that it was, it has to be by an official that sees the ball during the entire sequence from beginning to end. Otherwise, you're going to be, if you got your back, if you're looking up backs on that play, you're not going to know whether this particular player lost possession momentarily on the way down. You're not going to know whether a defender had her hand on the ball and that's what caused her to go down with the ball, in which case it would have been a held ball, but that's not what happened in this case. But see the ball from beginning to end before you call a held ball on a play like that. Somebody in the crew, it's a 3-person crew, somebody in the crew has to see that play from beginning to end. Reminder, the infamous, but probably change the rule to comply with what grandma thinks up in the stands. But if you dive for a loose ball on the floor and you gain possession of it and your momentum causes you to slide across the floor with that ball, it doesn't matter how far you slide, it's not a travel. For as long as you're sliding, it's not a travel. And while you're sliding, let me see what this says. No violation of A1 dives for a loose ball and slides after gaining control, either on his or her back or his or her stomach. No violation has occurred and A1 may either pass, shoot, start a dribble, or request a timeout during that slide. Once A1 has the ball and is no longer sliding, he or she may not roll over. He or she may sit up, but any attempt to get to his or her feet is traveling unless A1 is dribbling. And some players are clever. They realize that they can't get up with the ball in that scenario. And for some reason, they can't start a dribble, or they don't realize that they can start a dribble. So what they do is they just set the ball down while they're lying there with it. They just set the ball down and then stand up and then pick the ball up. They can do all of that except be the first to touch it. If they just set the ball down and then get up and then touch the ball, that's a traveling violation. Okie dokie, let's talk about goaltending and basket interference. Quinn, you're on.
All right. So we actually have rule changes both for basket interference and goaltending this year. So let's talk through both of those. We're going to start with basket interference. And just to review, so the first thing I think to sort of help differentiate between basket interference and goaltending has to do with a shot, with a try or a tap for goal or a free throw. Basket interference, we often see it happen on shots, but it doesn't have to be a shot. Basket interference is all about touching the ball when it's in a certain position relative to the basket. So let's start with basket interference. Basket interference occurs when a player touches the ball or any part of the basket, including the net, while the ball is on or within the basket. I'm gonna skip. I'm not. If you're looking at this in the rule book, I'm gonna do this a little bit out of order to emphasize the new things. So that's always been the case. It's basket interference to touch the ball while any part of the ball is within the imaginary cylinder, which has the basket ring as its lower base. So imagine just a cylinder that starts at the ring and extends straight up as far as you want. If any part of the ball is within that cylinder, you can't touch the ball. Touches the ball outside the cylinder while reaching through the basket from below. So if you put those two together, if you reach through the basket from below and touch the ball, wherever it is, it's going to be basket interference. And then the last old one is pulls down a movable ring so that it contacts the ball before the ring returns to its original position. Most of the time when I've seen this has been on missed dunk attempts. So they dunk the ball, it misses, it pops up, and then as the offensive player is letting go of the ring pops up and it pops the ball back up again. So that would be basket interference. Now, what's new is we have added Article 2, which is slaps or strikes the backboard, causing the backboard or basket to vibrate while the ball is on or within the basket or is touching the backboard or within the cylinder. Okay. So if you'll recall, it used to be this actually used to not be a violation at all. It used to be if you were making a legal attempt to block a shot, right? No matter how hard you hit the backboard, uh, if it did something to cause the ball to fall off the rim, it didn't matter as long as it was a legal attempt to block. Now we've taken all that out of it. If we slap or strike the backboard and it causes it to vibrate. Okay, so it's not automatic that just because they hit the backboard, we're going to have basket interference. But if they hit the backboard and it causes the backboard or basket to vibrate while the ball is on or within the basket or is touching the backboard or within the cylinder, essentially in any situation where it might possibly affect the shot, then we can now call that basket interference. There was one minor tweak also made just, and I think we've sort of always done this in Article 1, that if there's contact just with the net, and it's just minor contact and the ball goes in the basket, it doesn't otherwise affect the ball in any way that we might normally consider basket interference. We now have the discretion to sort of say that's not basket interference. I think we've always sort of done that But that's been added as an explicit exception. Now, again, important to note, you can have basket interference. I didn't say anything about offense or defense. Basket interference rules apply equally to the offense or the defense. So just like if the ball's sitting on the rim, a defensive player can't go up and knock it off the rim under NFHS rules, and an offensive player can't go and knock it into the basket. So again, basket interference applies equally to the offense and the defense. Now, goaltending. The one of the two big changes from the rules writing perspective, although I don't think we ever really called a lot of offensive goaltending, but now by rule, goaltending can only occur by the defense. Okay. So goaltending can only be by the defense, and goaltending occurs in the following two situations. So when a defensive player, the one we most commonly see, a defensive player touches the ball during a try or tap for a field goal while the ball is in its downward flight entirely above the basket ring level, has the possibility of entering the basket in flight, and is not touching the basket cylinder. Okay, so you need all those things. You need a try or tap for goal. You need the ball to be on its downward flight, although we've redefined downward flight in a way that we'll talk about in a minute. It needs to be entirely above the basket ring level, and it has to have the possibility of entering the basket in flight and not be touching the cylinder. Okay. That's the most common type of goaltending. The other that I've only ever seen happen once in like a SEC tournament game over a decade ago is if a defensive player touches the ball outside the cylinder during a free throw attempt. You also have goaltending, and goaltending on a free throw is also a technical foul. There's also that. Now, the other major change here, and for some reason in the printed copy of the rule book, it's not highlighted, but it is a rule change. Um, when the ball contacts the backboard, it is considered to be on its downward flight. So, regardless of whether the ball is actually traveling up or down, once it hits the backboard, we're going to consider it to be on its downward flight. So now, and this makes it consistent with the NCAA men's rule, and maybe the women. I'm not sure what the women's rule is, but it makes it consistent with the men's rule. Renee, is that what the women's rule is too?
Honestly, Quinn, goaltending or basket interference is our least concern.
Okay.
I'm not even sure.
Okay. Anyway, it's consistent with the men's rule, and it's consistent with what people have been yelling at us about for like 2 or 3 years now. Um, Once the ball hits the backboard, if it still meets all the other criteria, it's still a try or tap for goal. If it's entirely above the basket ring level, if it has the possibility of going in the basket and not touching the basket cylinder, then even if the ball is actually still traveling up, the fact that it hits the backboard now checks off that downward flight criteria, and we could have goaltending. Um, so again, it's not, well, they're pretty significant changes to the rule. They are going to require, as we'll see in some plays here, us to maybe rethink a little bit how we officiate some of these plays, because they're going to open up new possibilities for goaltending and basket interference that we're going to need to be aware of. Anything I missed there?
No,
Anything?
another A plus. All right, Renee, just tell us very briefly why this is a great basket interference call.
Hold
Uh,
up here.
It's actually a simple call. You can see it more on the replay, but this is basket interference because cannot touch the ball by an offensive player while the ball is still in the cylinder, on or within, um, which is exactly what black does. So as they go up, the ball is still on the cylinder and he taps it in. It's a great call by the C, staying engaged on rebounding responsibilities. So great pickup by the C.
Like Renee says, we had a good look here on the replay.
Very good. Next clip.
All right, let's take a look. Oh, there we go. All right, so now notice we don't have a call here, but remember the rule was different last year. Okay, so if we analyze this play under the new rule, okay, so just we'll talk about positioning a little bit in a second, but let's just based on the rule. All right, we're gonna have um, pass, a drive. All right, we have a shot. The shot is above the rim. Okay, it has hit the backboard. And now the one thing we can't tell here, but let's assume that the ball still has a chance to go in the basket. Okay, we can't, hard to tell from this angle, but let's assume it does. And now it is touched by the defensive player. Okay. Under the new rule, that would be that would be goaltending. Okay. Now, I think the nice thing I like about this play is it illustrates under the old rule, this was a very difficult call because you had to determine whether the ball was still on its actually upward trajectory or downward trajectory in order to rule this goaltending or not. Under the new rule, this is absolutely goaltending, right? So again, we've got a shot, it's touched the backboard, it's touched by the defense, still had a chance to go in, it's goaltending. Now, positioning wise, one of the things that puts us in a little bit of trouble here is we have a I think the rotation itself was okay, but I think the trail picks up on the rotation late. And remember, when we're thinking about coverage for goaltending basket interference, it's the off outside official that's usually going to have the best chance of helping us out on these, right? So if we think about this play, the trail, well, the ball gets past here, but the trail and the lead are looking at the contact on this drive. So the best chance of being able to stick with the shot is going to be the trail, but the new C here. But he's now trying to close down because he missed that rotation until late and is moving and maybe sees it, maybe doesn't. Maybe under the old rule he saw it and just thought it wasn't. But it's not a great position to be in. If we had recognized our rotation here and gotten down to the free throw line extended, then right at the point this drive starts, I would adjust myself by taking maybe a step off the sideline, maybe even like angle myself, take a diagonal step up and out. I can then see rebounding really well. I have a better chance of helping out on that goaltending on the other side. I just have a good look at all of those things. But again, we got to be prepared now to officiate those.
Well, I'll tell you the other mistake that I think is made here. If you would, please just go back, watch the rotation. The rotation's fine, but Renee, again, he's way too close to the baseline. Don't you agree as the lead?
Yeah.
Correct. Way too close to the baseline, and he actually needs to turn quicker or get over there quicker. I battle with this because I feel like a lot of times it goes back to the trail has and the C has to pick this up. The trail is way too staying way too long when the ball is technically in the C's primary. So the C has to pick this ball up, and I think that just will put the new trail to C in a better position to be able to make this call. Often too many times as the seed, when the ball is on our side, we don't pick that up as our primary.
The other problem that I have, Quinn, can you put your arrow on the guy who is presently the slot, well, on the other side of the floor, not this guy, the other guy. Yeah. Now watch what he does once this guy goes up and the shot goes up and he realizes that we've had a rotation. Where's he going? You see him move?
It's going away.
Absolutely no reason for him to be moving towards the division line at this point. And under with the rule the way it is now on goaltending and basket interference, I think you're going to see goaltending and basket interference has always been one of the toughest calls at the high school level because you might see a little bit more often than you see it in women's college basketball, Renee, but you still don't see it very often at the high school level. You don't see goaltending and basket interference, so it can catch you by surprise. Now, I think with the backboard being in play and the slapping of the backboard being in play, it's really important that we stay engaged on these plays. He's disengaged himself from this play now, right? Do we
Yes.
agree?
Yep.
For no apparent reason. So let's stay engaged. There was no reason for him to rotate out at this point. He needs to stay engaged with this drive to the basket all the way and stay engaged with the play after the whistle blows, because that's when basket interference and goaltending can happen and really catch you by surprise, as opposed to rubbernecking the crash as the outside official. Does that make sense, Quinn?
Yep. The other thing I
Okay,
was just going to mention, we talked about the lead here. When the lead rotates across, he's refereeing
that's
out
correct.
here.
Right.
We got a ball out here, and if you notice, and again, this is where, yes, we have what we're focusing on, but big picture mentality. There's a player coming out to set a screen here, right? If you have a screen set right here, right? You need to be. I'm looking for this guy. If I'm in the lead, as I'm rotating over, I'm looking for the guy who sets the screen to slip to the basket. And that's exactly what happens here, because they switch on the screen. They like the matchup on the big man now. He slips, and there. Okay. So again, you know, we can't just come out refereeing space or refereeing. Even we used to say, pick the nearest matchup, right? When we say that, we don't mean just any old matchup. We mean the nearest competitive matchup. And in this case, that guy who sets the screen in most offenses, he's going to try to slip to the basket if he can. And in this case, he does, and that's the play we end up having.
All right.
So on this play, um, you might sort of think, okay, there's nothing. So if we just watch it through, okay, shot goes up, ball is blocked into the backboard, nothing, right? But perfectly legal play. Okay. So what we want to emphasize here is not so much, and this may not be the greatest illustration, but we are going to be put in the position of having to make some very tough determinations at times between whether the ball was blocked into the backboard, which would be legal, or whether the ball hit the backboard and was then blocked, right? And that can happen very quickly, sort of a pin shot. Um, when in doubt, it's not a violation. But again, you want to be careful about this. So just be aware. We need to be careful about on this play, uh, just in terms of coverage, right? This official is just thinking about contact here. We have to trust our mechanics here that our partner is going to take this secondary defender. And now we've got to cover, yes, contact on that backside defender, but now also potentially a play coming off the backboard. Instead of running all the way down with this, if we stopped right here, again, maybe took a step out onto the floor, we'd have a much better shot. And again, this one doesn't end up being particularly difficult, but we'd have a much better shot at officiating that if we had a really close play. Right here, I mean, this is not a good position in any situation to be in. And I'm not sure. Maybe there was a late rotation and he just picked it up late or something. But we don't want to overrun these plays. We've got to be prepared when we have trailing defenders to officiate that.
That's a great point. And on the other hand, Renee, the trail becomes even more important than ever on these types of plays, right?
Yeah, especially with the new rules, it's imperative it's in transition that the C and the trail make sure they're in a good enough position to help out, because the lead already has a lot going on. So it'd be perfect if these particular plays or calls come from the outside, as they should, from our trail and lead. I mean, from our C and trail.
And the trail on this one really, really hustles, and that's what we need. All too often, we will see 9 players in the front court like this and never find the trail. But actually, you'll see the trail actually gets into the front court and is does a pretty good job of hustling his way into the front court on this play. But every now and then we need to get to sprint mode, and this be one of those. This is a great example of a play where Trail needed to be in sprint mode. Let's talk about backcourt plays just a
So
little bit and wind up the night, Quinn and Renee.
yeah, so I think before we do that, I think Renee's got to run to another meeting.
Yeah, I have a meeting
So
time. All right, guys.
Okay, that's
so
not a problem. Thank you so much, Renee. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. I hope everybody has a healthy and a great season.
Fantastic.
thanks, Renee.
Thank you.
All right,
All
so
right,
you
we'll
want to jump
talk
into
about
some rules?
we'll talk about backcourt. Just a couple of the basic rules, just as a reminder. The so-called 3-point one, which is the one that I like to talk about as it applies to backcourt. Both feet and the ball have to be across the line in the front court. That only applies to a dribbler bringing the ball from the back court to the front court. And the rule is that when dribbling the ball from back court to front court, both feet and the ball of the dribbler must be entirely in the front court in order for the ball to have gained front court status. So please, everybody, keep that in mind. Only applies to a dribbler, only applies to a dribbler going from back court to front court. Also remember, if during a throw-in, and I think Quinn's going to have a play that's going to sort of help illustrate this. If during a throw-in by Team A, the ball glances off A1's hand into the front court and then goes into the back court, any player for Team A can be the first to touch the ball in the back court. The reason for that is because, as applicable to the backcourt rules, a team possession was never established. At some point, in order to have a backcourt violation, at some point, team possession has to be established. That's one of the key elements of a backcourt violation. There has to be team possession, and the ball has to have gained front court status. Not the player necessarily, but the ball. So let's take a look at this first play, Quinn, and this is a typical high school play where you're thinking about backcourt or not backcourt.
Yeah, so we're going to come down the court. The ball's going to be passed around, and then we're going to have sort of a loose ball. And then we have an official who has ruled a backcourt violation. So again, let's back up and let's step through the elements. So as Chuck said, right, we got to have somebody's got to be in team control to even consider this. So right now we have White has team control, and it's important that we know, right, that White will maintain team control until something happens. Namely, on this case, the only way they would lose it in here is if Black gains control of the ball. So while the ball is loose here, there's no player possession, but White still has team control of the ball. White still has team control of the ball. And now White has team control of the ball. White was the last to touch, if I back it up here just a second, White was the last to touch it in the front court and the first to touch it in the back court. We have a backcourt violation. So while in team control, the White can't be the last to touch it in the front court and the first to touch it in the back court. The coach here, you can see the coach come running down, and I can't see what he's saying, but I'm going to guess he's saying, Black, whatever number that is, Black 10, 13, whoever that is, he touched it. Yeah, he did touch it. But White touched it again in the front court. Okay. Now, there's some confusion because it's different between some of the college rules. The men's college rule is different. But under high school rules, it doesn't matter that Black touched it here. White's still in team control. They were the last to touch it in the front court and the first to touch it in the back court. It's a backcourt violation. The only thing I'd say here is, our C does a good job our trail does a good job of adjusting to this play as it develops. It's always hard when you have these loose ball situations. What I would say is, when you realize the backcourt line, the division line is going to be contested, just get there. Okay, so you'll see on this play that he actually sort of holds up to almost stay even with the players. But if he had just gotten right to the division line and stood right there, just sprint back there real quick, and then you can turn back and referee those plays. I mean, you're refereeing them the whole way, but you can still referee them from there. So don't hold up when you realize the division line is going to be contested there.
Just one more quick comment, and this may seem obvious to everybody, but if you just keep this principle in mind also, I think it'll help us out a lot. I think backcourt is difficult because the rules are pretty complicated and there's a lot of exceptions and whatnot, but remember that if a defensive player is the last to touch the ball in the front court, there can never be a backcourt violation. There's no scenario where there could be a backcourt violation if the defensive player is the last to touch the ball in the front court.
Sorry,
right,
one other
second
thing I
clip.
just thought about,
Yes,
we talked about this a little bit last year when we brought in the designated spots, but just to remind ourselves, the
good.
violation occurs here. We're going to put the ball in play at the designated spot at the 28-foot mark. Okay. So just remember that. And that's an easy, if your partner starts to put the ball in play in the backcourt or at the division line or somewhere else, just hit your whistle. Hey, 28-foot mark. Okay, that's where it's got to go by rule.
Good point. All right, this one is kudos to the coverage on this play. It's just great coverage by the trail official who anticipates that pad, doesn't stand where he was. If you go back to the beginning of this play, and there's just too many of us who want to stand right where he is right now and not move and just referee this play inside out. And if he had stood right where he was, he wouldn't have had a much better look than the coach has, who thinks this is a backcourt violation. But he is in great position, totally credible position. It's close, but he is not touching in the backcourt. Now, keep in mind that if that foot that Quinn just had his arrow on, if that foot had touched any part of that division line, then we would in fact have a backcourt violation on this play. But great job by the official. Also, another principle to remember, you cannot be in the front court and the back court at the same time. You're one or the other. And had he, even though he's got one foot in the front court, had that other foot touched even a milligram of the backcourt line, that would have been a backcourt violation. Great job.
Also, a great job here after this. You know, the coaches, this is a big game for this team. You know, it's a rivalry. So, you know, it's the coach gets animated, he gets excited. The official totally unfazed and recognizes probably that we're in a situation where the coach is making a comment. I don't have to say anything at all. Doesn't say anything. And now look, the coach, I mean, we're literally less than a second from that sort of quick burst. The coach is back to coaching. He's engaged. We're great. We would have made the situation worse had we tried to respond to the coach, especially tried to respond to him in the moment.
Very good.
All right. Last play. So it sort of initially looks similar to this other play. So again, same good initial positions here. We're gonna have a throw in. Let's just watch it through one time. Okay. Now let's talk through this play. So we back up. All right. Right now, ball's in the air. Now the player, gold number 2, leaves the ball from his leaves the floor from his front court. And one of the principles always in play here is sort of you are where you are until you get where you're going, right? So he's in the front court because he left from the front court. So right here, the ball, right here, gold is in team control. The ball has front court status, and 2 is touching the ball. 2 lands. Now he's in the back court. The ball has backcourt status, and gold is the first to touch the ball in the backcourt. It is true that in this case, gold is the last to touch the ball in the front court, the first to touch it in the backcourt, and gold is in team control. However, this is not a backcourt violation because there is an explicit exception to the backcourt rule for throw-ins. Okay, so while this meets every one of the elements we normally think about for a backcourt violation, it's not a backcourt violation because he caught the ball off of a throw in. Now, let's change the scenario slightly. So this is correctly ruled not a backcourt violation. Now, if I back up here, let's say that right here as he releases the ball, let's say right here, number 4 had tipped the ball. Okay. If 4 had tipped the ball, the throw in would have ended. Had a member of any team touch the ball legally, the throw in would have ended. In that case, had the ball been tipped and this happened, now we know that gold is the last to touch on the front court, first to touch in the back court with gold in team control. This would have been a backcourt violation had the ball been tipped, because the tipping of the ball would have ended the throw in, and so the exception would no longer apply. However, in this case, the exception does apply because again, this is caught off of a throw in. The other situations, and I'm ad-libbing here, so Chuck will correct me if I'm wrong. I think the other cases where this exception applies is if the player is on defense, if it's off a jump ball, and maybe off of a shot also, I think. No, off of a shot, there'd be no, oh yeah, off of a shot, I think as well. So there are some other exceptions. So just go in there and get those. The important thing is if you have
That's the way to ad-lib it. Tell them to read the rule book.
yeah, read the rule book. If I'm wrong, we're not recording any more of these. So write Chuck, and maybe next year he'll remember to correct me. But the important thing to remember here, if you have a coach that is sort of good, you might have a coach that goes, he can't do that. You know, they know the backcourt rule, but not the exceptions. You're not in the heat of a game going to convince a coach that you're not going to give them a lecture on the rules and all the exceptions. This is one of those where you have to say, Coach, there's an exception. In this situation, it's not a backcourt, and you just got to move on. That you're not gonna. You just got to say they will find out later when they email Chuck or when they email whoever that you're right, and that you being right will build your credibility. Getting in an argument with the coach about it and trying to convince him that you're right is not going to work in that moment.
Right. Now, show that player catch the ball again in midair. And we'll just go, I just want to make sure we're clear on this rule. Right there, stop it. It doesn't matter how this guy lands. It doesn't matter how this guy lands. It's not going to be a backcourt violation because of the explicit exception to the backcourt rule. He could land with 1 foot in the front court, 1 foot in the back court. It lands simultaneously with 1 foot in the front court, 1 foot in the back court. It's not going to be a backcourt violation in that case, because you can't be in the back court and the front court at the same time. If 1 foot's touching the back court, it's back court. So if he lands with his first, say his right foot touches in the front court and then his left foot touches in the back court on this play, it's not a backcourt violation by rule. If this was a pass from inbounds, that's a whole different scenario. Now we would have a possibility of a backcourt violation depending on where he lands. And in this case, it would be a backcourt, where he landed would make it a backcourt violation. But because this is a throw-in as opposed to, what am I trying to say, Quinn? A front court,
Just a pass from a
regular
teammate, a
pass
live
to the
ball
front court,
pass.
right.
Yeah.
All right, so keep that in mind and note, if a player catches the ball with 1 foot on the floor in the front court, now that's not an airborne. 1 foot's already on the floor in the front court, and the other foot's in the air, and then that second foot touches in the back court. It doesn't matter whether it's a throw-in pass or inbounds pass. That's going to be a backcourt violation. If you don't understand why, call me and I'll explain it. But that's a different scenario than the play that we're looking at here on this clip. If a player catches the ball with 1 foot on the floor in the front court, he's caught the ball, he has player control, we have team possession, we have the ball has front court status. If that other foot touches any part of the back court, we now have a backcourt violation. And if a player receives a throw-in pass while straddling the division line with both feet touching the floor, that can't be right. I don't know what I'm reading there. Forget what I was just about to say. I was ad-libbing. Forget that part. I'm done. Quinn, what I'd like to do is, that completes the 6 clinics. I know everybody's watched, and I appreciate that. I hope that they've been, helpful, in preparing us for the season. I do want to do a short administrative kind of, house cleaning sort of video, that we will send out. We'll film it, in the next, 4, 5, 6, 7 days at Quinn's convenience, to send out to all of you and just talk about, like I said, some administrative stuff that I think it's important that everybody hear about, and expectations and how we're gonna proceed through the season. Games are coming up soon, real games in addition to the scrimmages. So go in and start, because I know you haven't. None of you have, I don't think, apparently. Put your blocks in that you need to put in, but make yourself as available as you possibly can, because we've got games coming up in the next several weeks. All right, that's it for now. Quinn, thank you very much. And just let me know when it's going to be convenient for you and I to get together again.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.